Starting out on something is sometimes some of the hardest things we will ever do. We talk ourselves out of things, we tell ourselves we're not good enough. But in today's video, I'm going to give you my 5 top tips on how to start your novel in 2025. Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you've not been here before, my name is Tracy Mayhew and I write contemporary romances set in the UK, and I also write YA fantasy fiction based on myths and legends. Welcome back to my How I Write series. If you've not seen the previous 4 videos in this series where we talk about everything from writing great characters and researching your novel, like research trips and things like that, then I will leave a link to that playlist up in the card, so feel free to go and check that out. So my first tip for you would be to allow yourself time to just daydream. Daydream about the story, imagine the world that you are creating, whether that's a contemporary world, a fantasy world, a sci-fi world even. Just let yourself have the time that you need to imagine what you want to, how you want the world to be. So I would say go on Pinterest, have a little look at some of the pictures that might inspire your work, make a board. I've done that before. I don't do that every time, but I have done that in the past. So making a board to inspire you would be good. And I also always carry a notebook with me. This is the notebook I am currently using for the 3rd book in my Viking Saga series. And in there I put down everything that I want to cover, everything that I want to explore. If I have any questions that I want to follow up on, I write those down so that when I come to planning, like properly sitting down and planning it out, I can research those points that I've made a note of. So I always recommend having a notebook nearby and allowing yourself time to daydream about the story. The next tip that I have for you is to allow yourself time to plan. Now, obviously, this will be different if you are a pantser. I am not a pantser. I'm what they call a plantser, which is kind of like somewhere in the middle. So, what I do is I sit down and I start writing out a chapter summary, or as I've since found out it's called, thanks to Matthew Harvey on the Rock Paper Swords podcast, it's called a chapter treatment, which is basically I write paragraph for each chapter, just a paragraph of notes for each chapter, what's going to happen. It is not great. I don't worry about grammar. I don't worry about it sounding amazing. I don't worry about it having wonderful flowing sentences. It is just get the ideas down and then you can work on that later. Now, for me, being a plantser, I don't necessarily stick to that, and I get to a certain point in the story and I kind of let the characters take over if necessary, but that's okay. If that's how you find, if that's how you work, that is okay. Unfortunately, I don't have any advice for this stage for pantsers because I'm not one. And I've tried pantsing and I just cannot do it. If you are a pantser, you're just going to have to experiment a little bit, I think, at this stage. For my 3rd Viking book, I am going to be setting aside about 2 months to do that, just so that I've given myself enough time to write the chapter treatment, to explore any ideas and research things that I need to research, so that when I come to writing in April, I can actually sit down and write as much as I can. Obviously, as I write, things like research points might crop up, but I would just leave those until I finish the first draft, or until I have maybe a day where I can't write. But yeah, I try to get the research and the planning done in a big chunk before I start writing, so that when I do start writing, I'm ready to go. So yeah, that's my 2nd tip for you, to allow yourself some time to plan and research. My 3rd tip for you is to make sure you set up a space where you can write. Now, that doesn't have to be a wonderful office like I'm lucky enough to have. It could be like in the dining room, as long as your family know that when your laptop is set up in that place, that is your writing time, that's fine. And make sure that the people around you know that when you are sitting down at your laptop, especially if you're sitting in a more high traffic area in your house or flat or wherever it is that you're living, make sure that people know that you are writing. So keep interruptions to the minimum. I would definitely make sure you have a space and you're surrounded by the things that are going to make those writing sessions really enjoyable. So it could be candles, it could be crystals, aromatherapy diffusers. I've got all of those. I use all of those at various times to kind of like just bring some joy to the writing time that I set aside for myself. Tip number 4 is to make sure that you write regularly and that you schedule your writing time. As a writer or as a new writer, you will probably hear everyone saying write every day. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't personally write every day. I tried it, I failed at it. I beat myself up about it, so I don't do it anymore. You might be someone who can write every day and you're great at that and you're dedicated and you're disciplined enough to do that, and that's fantastic. If that works for you, definitely write every day. But for me personally, I prefer to say write regularly. Now for me, I have to schedule that time. I went through a period when I first started writing of thinking, well, I'm a teacher by day, I work to a timetable every single weekday. I don't want to work to a timetable when I'm not at work. But that didn't work for me, because without that timetable, I've spent so many years working to a timetable that when I didn't have one, I kind of didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know how long I should be writing. It sounds really ridiculous when I say it out loud, but that was the thing. And then sometimes I just wouldn't write at all because I didn't have that scheduled time. So for me personally, I do recommend writing out a schedule, even if you do it on a bit of paper, even if you do it in your notebook, or if you've got a diary, a journal or something. I personally use Google Calendar. I synced it to my phone. It sets off a little notification whenever I've scheduled out my writing time. It does a little ping and I know that is my writing time. It comes up with a little reminder on my screen as well. So it just gives me a nudge and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I was supposed to be doing that. That's something that I need to factor into the evening. If you've never tried doing that, I recommend try it. If you don't like it, forget about it. Find something that works for you. But that's what I would suggest. Write regularly and schedule that writing time in, and make sure the people around you, friends, family, know that is your writing time, because there's nothing worse than sitting down to have a writing session and someone comes along and interrupts you, and you're like, now you've got something else to do, and you invariably move away from the writing. So make sure you protect that time. Hello, so this is just future me popping on because I'm editing the video, the main video, and I just realised that I forgot to say something about scheduling. Sorry, if you hear a meow, it's Sue. She's on my lap, but if I stop stroking her, she ends up meowing at me, so please ignore any of that. Anyway, yeah, so scheduling. In the coming weeks, I would like to do a video solely dedicated to how I schedule out my week, balancing work with writing, with business stuff. So if that is something that you would like to see, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you are notified when that video goes live. That's it. I'm jumping off now. You're going to go back to the normal video. See you later. And my fifth and final tip for you today is to silence your inner critic. This is possibly the hardest thing to do, because even now, and I've been writing I think I started the Book of Legend in 2010, 2011. So I've been writing a good few years, but even now I can write a sentence or a chapter and think that is really rubbish. And it's very tempting to go back at the end of my writing session and try to rewrite it, scrap bits, and try and make it better. But you've got to try not to do that. You've got to try to ignore that little voice that is telling you that what you've just written isn't good enough, because you can do that later. But if you get to the end of a chapter and then spend ages and hours trying to fix it and tinkering with it over and over again, you're just going to waste your time and you're not going to get the book actually finished. You're not going to make the progress you need to make. So for me personally, it does take, I'm not going to lie, it does take practice. And the first few times you'll find yourself going back and thinking, that's really bad, I don't like that, let's rewrite that whole section. Try not to. When you find yourself doing it, get up, make yourself a cup of tea, take a 5-minute break, come back to the laptop and start again. I'm going to tell you something that I do. When I come back for the following writing session, I might reread a page of what I wrote the previous time just to refresh my memory, and then I might tinker with some things. If it's simple tinkering, if it requires more focused work and more focused corrections, then I just leave it. I just read it, get the gist of the story, and then carry on again. So there are slight exceptions that I might just critique my work of the previous day, but I don't go back for a whole chapter and then waste an hour of today's writing session trying to play around with what I wrote the previous day. So yeah, I would try to silence your inner critic as much as you can. So that's it. They are my 5 top tips on how you can start your story today. I will see you next week with a brand new video. If you enjoyed the tips from this video, let me know which one was your favourite, or if you have other tips for how to get started on a novel, please let me know in the comments below. And I will see you next week with a new video. In the meantime, if you want to catch up on the rest of this playlist, you can catch up with it over here. Until next time, have a good week. Bye.